Hey everybody, thanks for watching all my videos lately. I wanted to do a bit more about Ashiata Shiemash in Gurdjieff's book, All and Everything. Down in my channel, I have the chapter to do with Ashiata Shiemash read or as an audio, or if you have the book, obviously read the book, read that chapter. I think he's a very important character, and myself and Josh did a little show about him as well at around the same time. But the reason I'm bringing him up again now is because people were getting in touch about some of the things I was saying about, oh, we only need, or Gurdjieff said we need 200 people to be awake, and that will lead humanity into a better way, an up evolving way. And that, in this day and age, probably needs more than 200 people because there's more of us than there was back in that time. I don't know how many. I've had a few people ask me, well, how many do we need? I don't know, but we do need awakened people to help humanity move onwards. And in the Ashiata Shiemash chapter, he talks about how Ashiata Shiemash comes with the good words and the teachings, and that he passed on his knowledge to others, who then passed it on to others after that. And he actually says in there that he instructed his pupils, his students, to pass the knowledge on to another 100 people. So, every student initiated another 100 people, and then they would initiate another 100 people, and hopefully that would grow and spread. But I also know that Gurdjieff said in his time, oh, you mustn't talk about the work to outsiders. This should only be discussed with insiders, like people in the work. But I think perhaps in that time it's because he was making sure it only went to people that really wanted to hear, and those that really wanted to see what was and understand what was going on, because they knew they needed to do something with themselves. They understood this world, the lives they were living, the rat race that we're stuck in wasn't the right way. They weren't awake. They knew there was more. And I hope that's what you're feeling. That's why you're doing these kind of shows, or looking into this kind of thing, looking at other paths, because you know that there's more to life than what we're told by our peers. And that, as Gurdjieff says, this is like a lunatic asylum that we're all living in, and we have to maneuver our way through it. We can't escape it. There are people that go off, become monks and hide away, or nuns and go and hide away, but that's not necessarily the right way. He says that's one path, but that only sorts out one center, where combining all three centers, we're bringing in what he would call the fourth way, because you're not being just a yogi or a monk or a fakir, you're using all these ways. I would love to go off and live on my own somewhere out in the sticks with the countryside and the wildlife, but then we're not developing ourselves in this lunatic asylum, and instead we'll be just working on ourselves, thinking, oh, we're doing it, and we're not partaking in real life, because we're deluding ourselves that what we're doing is the right thing. It might be good to go off on a retreat now and then. I don't see anything wrong with that. But then you have to come back into this world to see whether you can, if you've changed, and for the better, hopefully, and maneuver your way through the lunatic asylum. There's I'm sure it's a Buddhist saying of how all these people go to their monasteries or nunneries and learn the ways of the monks and the nuns and seek enlightenment, and think they've changed and developed themselves. But the real test is when you go back home with your family, because it's so easy to fall back into old patterns, and you react so quickly to things instead of putting in everything that you've learned and thinking, oh, I'm going to be nice and calm. And when mother or father or my brother or my sister push my buttons, I'm not going to react anymore like I used to. But we do, because we react so quickly. It's only through practice that we learn to act differently. which I'm sure we are all doing. I know I'm making it sound like it's a real hard job. It is a hard job to do this kind of work, but with perseverance and will, which is the most important thing, if you had the will to do it, you can change yourself or take control of them different eyes that pop up and take over our lives when we least expect it. You know, it's all, you know, it's all down to the egoism again as well. You know, is your ego trying to drive you to do this kind of work because it wants that ego thrill? Or are you doing this because your essence is trying to come through and you want to get out of being a mechanical automaton or, you know, robot, or act mechanically in your life, and instead be awake, be alive. You know, as Gurdjieff says in his last book, life is real only then when I am. You're trying to be a real person, the real I, real man, real woman. So, oh yeah, well, I was going to talk about Ashiata Shiemash, who was like a sacred guy that came in the All in Everything book, you know, possibly even an angel sent down to try and awaken humanity and to guide them onto a evolution. And I wanted to just read this bit because I reread the chapter again while I was off down the seaside. I was being distracted left, right and centre. So sometimes I couldn't quite concentrate on it, but that happens, doesn't it? You know, and other times I'll be reading it, but like, I don't remember this from last time. This is a great thing of rereading All in Everything over and over. You know, I sometimes give it a year or so between rereading the whole book. Sometimes I just pick out certain chapters, but if you're new to this, I do advise reading the whole book. So he's talking about Ashiata's, like he set up this brotherhood, and he's called this brotherhood, and I hope I'm saying this right, Chafatan Tori, Tchafatanturi, Chafatan Tori. And this brotherhood, the name for this brotherhood, Chafatan Tori, means to be or not to be at all. Kind of a bit like, you know, the old Shakespeare, to be or not to be. Oh, that's quite an esoteric thing. Are you a being or are you not being and you're fast asleep? So this brotherhood's called this, to be or not to be, because they're trying to wake up on, hopefully they are waking up because they've got the wonderful guidance and teacher of Ashiata Shiemash. I just wanted to add that Shiemash was seen as a sun god in the ancient, like not in All in Everything, well, it could be in All in Everything, but in the ancient times, I think it's Persian maybe. I should have looked that up before, but anyway, it's a sun god name. And Gurdjieff's writings are teaching us to go to the sun, to be a solar being. So I like it that he's chosen that name. You know, he always has, everything he writes has meaning to it. So, but when, like, so this brotherhood, when it's being taught by Shiemash, Ashiata Shiemash, he changes the name of it and it becomes Heech Tavori. Heech Tavori. It's kind of like a special meaning, a special word, which I'm pretty sure has to do with intentional suffering. Hold on one moment. Let me just get my little all in index, all and guiding index to All in Everything, because he's trying to make sure that they're waking up, obviously, and give them the teachings. So it says here, it's the brotherhood founded by Ashiata Shiemash, and signifying only he will be called and will become the Son of God, who acquires in himself conscience. There's done so many shows on conscience. You know, we need to awaken our conscience. Our conscience, I'm pretty sure it is our soul. And so he could see that the brotherhood wanted to be or not to be. They knew that was their mission, to be. And having that name, to be or not to be, reminds you am I being or am I not being? Am I, the old I am exercise. And then changing the name to Hinch Twirling. It's reminding you that you want to awaken your soul, your conscience, and listen to it. So, but he talks about how these, he calls them brethren, these brothers. I like to think there were some sisters there too. They had to initiate 100 other beings by giving them the required intensity of ableness, the required intensity of ableness. So we need to have the intensity of ableness. We want to do it, we wish to do it, we desire to do it, to develop ourselves. But he says over time, they're, as the brotherhood went on over generations, maybe not that long after Ashiata Shiemash left the planet, ego entered some of them priests that were leading it. And then they started misleading it and changing the rules or whatever, as egotistic people do. They always feel like they know better. And he says, this is what I wanted to read, those beings were called and are still called by this word priest, who by their pious existence and by the merits of their acts perform for the good of those around them, stand out so much from the rank and file of the ordinary free-brain beings there, that whenever these ordinary beings there have occasion to remember them, there arises and proceeds in their presences the process called gratitude. So he's talking there about the great teachers, the great initiates that came on after Ashiata Shiemash, the elders of the tribe, the elders of the brotherhood. And they were also known as the all the rights possessing brothers. In fact, Ashiata Shiemash called all the rights possessing brothers were the great initiates. And that's what, we're looking for them kind of people now, or we're wanting to become them kind of people, because we need great initiates to start, be initiating everybody that wants to be part of this. It is difficult to talk about this with people these days, this kind of work, but you will, once you're developing yourself, you develop that magnetic center that starts attracting like-minded people to you. It also attracts a few weirdos sometimes, but those that aren't interested in this very soon just walk away and have no more thoughts about it because they want to go back to sleep. Those that want to know more will be there and ask, and we can only guide them. Like I need guidance too, we all need to help each other. I get a lot of help from all the books that people advise or tell me about other videos or things that I should watch. We're all helping each other to stay on this path. It's so easy to slip off it. So as you become more and more developed, you start seeing when you're about to fall off it, or where there's some temptation there. And there's like a little doo-doo-doo, but I'm hoping it's our higher selves coming down and saying, nope, don't do that. I'd like to think that we don't slip back into old ways. And I have noticed myself that over the years, I am a different person to how I was like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, definitely when I was much younger. I'm not that person anymore. Whereas I see people that don't do this kind of work stay the same as they grow up. And Gurdjieff used to say they get to a certain age, I think it's the early 20s, and if they don't change by then, they stay the same. I think Jerry Seinfeld did that old joke about how you can tell what age a man started having a family and kids, because he stays dressed in that whatever that fad was at that time throughout the rest of his life. And it's the same kind of thing of people, if they don't want to follow this kind of work, they don't change, they don't develop themselves, and so they stay the same. It's like they're little children, but they think they're adults. But to become the great initiate, Gurdjieff writes, the ones that became the great initiates, who had already sensed the objective impulse of divine love, consciously by their reason and unconsciously by the feelings in their subconscious, and who had full confidence that by certain self-efforts, this divine being impulse might become and forever remain an inseparable part of their ordinary consciousness. And I really reverberated with that when I reread it over the weekend, because it's like, that's true. It's like I've always known that something was different. I was always kind of a bit odd compared to all the people that were asleep and all the kids and my friends that were not going to wake up while they were children, and my peers that I could see were, you know, I didn't understand they were asleep back then. But I've always had that underlying feeling that, you know, as he says here, I had already sensed that divine love, the objective divine love, but I didn't understand perhaps what it was. I just knew things were different when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, and I kept trying to fit in with the people that were asleep. Thank God I never really did. So I'm just going to read that again. Who had already sensed the objective impulses of divine love, consciously by their reason and unconsciously by the feelings in their subconscious. So it's like your subconscious is trying to tell us all there's more to life. And I think everybody, even the people that are asleep, have that, but they're just ignoring it, where you on this path doing this kind of work can feel it, hear it, you know, sense it inside you. So that's why you're doing it. And you know, he says, and who had full confidence that by certain self-efforts, this divine being impulse might become and forever remain an inseparable part of their ordinary consciousness. Well, I hope you feel that. I definitely sense that, you know, but I needed Gurdjieff to explain to me what this sense was that I had. You know, I just always knew, but didn't quite have the knowledge or the wisdom back then to understand it. But thankfully, he explained it to me all when I read that book. And hopefully you guys feel the same way. And Gurdjieff writes, and so only he who consciously assists the process of this inner struggle and consciously assists the non-desires to predominate over the desires behaves just in accordance with the essence of our common Father Creator himself. Whereas he who with his consciousness assists the contrary only increases his sorrow. So all those people that are asleep and are walking about like mechanical robots, they're increasing the divine sorrow, where we doing this kind of work and working on ourselves, we lighten that divine sorrow, which, as I've said in previous shows, seems to be one of our main aims. We're trying to become attuned with the divine source. In Gurdjieff's words, his endlessness, the creator. We want to be part of the harmonious workings of the universe. We want to help with the running of it. So we're striving to become objective conscience. We're trying to wake this up. But one of the problems is, obviously, which is what we've been trying to avoid, what I was saying earlier about how our peers and our childhood friends and such, like the ones that aren't waking up, they can sometimes try to distract us back onto their way of thinking. And he says about egoism and of education and of our bosses and such like, to teach and to suggest to their children how to be insincere with others and deceitful in everything has become so ingrained in the beings of the planet Earth at the present time that it has even become their conception of their duty towards their children. And this kind of conduct towards their children they call by the famous word education. They educate their children never to be able and never to dare to do as the conscience present in them instinctively directs, but only that which is prescribed in the manual of bon ton, usually drawn up there just by various candidates for Hasnas Musses. Oh, old Hasnas Mass. Hasnasmus. One of Gurdjieff's words for people that are trying to lead the way but don't really know what they're doing. Terrestrial nullities, as he says in, I'm just looking up the meaning in the guiding index. Beings with Hasnath properties are terrestrial nullities. I wonder if they're the people that some refer to as NPCs. I don't know. I think these are people that are more interfering. First definition. Hasnath must designates every already definitized common presence of a free-brain being, both those consisting only of the single planetary body as well as those whose higher being bodies are already coated in them, and which for some reason data have not been crystallized for the divine impulses of objective conscience. That's an ego trip, that where they're doing it for themselves and not for the divine. And he goes on throughout the All and Everything, explaining how these different Hasnath masses interfere in people's lives and in the runnings of the universe and the evolution of humanity. We've got to follow our conscience, people. And I would highly recommend reading the Ashiata Shiemash chapter. Well, I highly recommend reading the whole book, obviously. But as I say, I've done an audio. I'll try and remember to stick it at the end of the video, because he does explain, if you're struggling with this path or need some encouragement, he does explain all of it there and there. That's why it's called All and Everything. So watch out for them Hasnath masses out there, peoples, and look out for the people that have their objective conscience awakened and doing the work of the divine. So until next time. Peace.